updates and best practice to promote, support, develop and protect the Scottish red meat sector.
Hello, and thank you for downloading the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. I'm Mark Stephen. We've just gone past the autumn equinox, so it's officially not summer anymore. And indeed, it's already got colder, the nights are definitely coming in. So this is a really good time to take a look at grazing strategies, to plan ahead, to investigate technologies that might help, and consider how you might use your grazing and feed most effectively. To discuss that, I'm joined today by two folk, Michael Blanche from Cultucha Farm near Forgandenny, just south of Perth. Michael is an independent farm consultant who's worked for SAC and QMS in the past. He's currently a tenant farmer with a small herd of suckler cows and over 1,200 ewes, and he is so obsessed with pasture that he even has his own podcast dedicated entirely to the subject called The Pasture Pod. Willie Harcus farms about 1,300 acres at Quantonis on the mainland of Orkney. He's got 370 Aberdeen Angus cross-suckler cows and a flock of about 650 ewes. Willie grows oats and spring barley and a few acres of neeps for his sheep, and he's been practising rotational grazing for 3 years now and has made a lot of changes to extend his grazing season. I'm going to start with you, Michael. Give me a quick overview of the grazing season so far in Perthshire. What's the ground looking like?
Yeah, it's been a funny year, really. We started off dry, as everyone knows, and got very wet. And now September's probably been our best grass growing month, weirdly. We haven't grown a huge amount of grass compared to normal years, to be honest. We are organic, and this is probably 1 year might have been tempted with nitrogen. So there's plenty of grass around at the moment.
Willie, how about you up in Orkney? I mean, you're a couple of 100 miles further north at least.
Yeah, it's been quite a mixed year as well, but quite favourable for us, I would say. January, February was very wet. March, it really started to improve. April, good, I would say. May, a good grass growing month. June as well, quite favourable. July would have been very hard and dry. It slowed things up. And then August, September, like Michael's saying, grass growth's been very good again. So, yeah, I would say quite a nondescript summer, but very good for grass and livestock, I would say. So,
let's begin with the basics, Michael. Tell me, what is, for a start, a managed grazing strategy, and why do you use one?
I suppose why I do it is the 2 Ps. First being profit, and the second is may sound weird, but it's pasture welfare. So, and by that I mean, we all know that good animal welfare, or really good animal welfare, produces really good outcomes. So, your livestock grow fast and they have great longevity, and their fertility is really good. So all that welfare adds to really good outcomes. And I know it's much harder to see, but in terms of plant health, you've got to treat the plant as it would want to be treated. Take ryegrass, for example. It's evolved for 24 million years, and 400 years ago, we decided to set stock. And before that, it's just got used to a hard graze, a long rest, and it developed that way. So, and if you put that into a 24-hour clock, for example, that 24 million years, we started set stocking at 2.5 minutes to midnight. So those plants are actually not being treated the way that they should be. And so managed grazing is trying to fit what the plant would want. And that means really just moving stock around. So hard graze, long rest, and there's a few sums involved if you really want to get into it, but that's the basic principle, is just being kind to the plant, and it's invisible. That's why farmers are really good at animal welfare, but we need to think about plant welfare as well, I would suggest.
And Willie, living on any island, I would imagine it pays to be as self-sufficient as possible. Now, how does managed grazing fit into that?
You're 100% right with being self-sufficient on an island. For everything's a cost that comes in, so any cost reductions we can make is great. I would say, yeah, for a rotational grazing system for us, it makes a huge difference. Just your pasture management. I would say we've built up a huge resilience in our grass from doing it. I would say we've got a stronger grass base now. A lot of the fields already would be in better production of what they've been in for the last 10, 20 years, I would say. So going forward, you can always adapt that and change it and make it better, but it's certainly made a huge difference to us, I would say. So.
That all sounds excellent. What are you doing now that you weren't doing 3 or 4 years ago?
Traditionally, we were very much stocked, set areas for certain categories of livestock, and yeah, it worked good. But we were too reliant on artificial fertilizer, I would say, and you found at certain times of year you struggled due to just lack of grass or basically going through a less growthy stage of the year, and also our winters were getting too long. You had a late spring turnout and an early housing of cattle then, really. So you tended to, I suppose, get kind of railroaded down. The easiest solution was just to house cattle, take them in, but with the other side, you end up making way too much silage, and it's not a natural way to be doing it, really.
And it all has a cost, as you rightly pointed out earlier. Michael, can you actually sit down with a calendar and plan this stuff, or do you have to work on the basis of what's actually happening on the land in terms of the weather and things and everything else?
I think you can plan a template if you like. You know, grass isn't going to grow as quick in October as it is in June, although maybe 2018 disproved that. But you've got a base to work off. But then the exciting part, and it's not, it's nothing to be scared of, but the exciting part is actually ducking and diving with what the environment and the weather chucks at you. So it makes it interesting. If you knew exactly what was going to happen, it's pretty dull. And it's a skill that you can develop, I suppose information is really good. I don't want to use the word data because it scares people witless, but, a measurement every fortnight, you kind of know what's going on, and you can look into the future because you know what your animals need to eat. And
when do you actually start planning ahead? Is there a point in a year, or is it just a continuous process?
When it's a rainy day and you actually sit down and say, I really better plan ahead, I suppose is the answer. But I think actually someone told me that, say we're in 2020 now, 2021's grazing season actually started last month. So you've got to think about building covers in August, September, the year before your grazing season, if you like. And when you shut off grass really has an impact on when you can graze grass in the spring. So August is a really good time. So it's a bit too late for all the listeners, but you can do it any time. Don't feel beholden to the calendar. But August building covers into the autumn is certainly a good thing to think about.
Well, would you agree with that? I mean, what's your autumn-winter grazing strategy?
We've certainly have a lot more planned out of what we used to, I would say. We would very, very much just been living for week to week on it, but actually knew this year we would have started closing up a lot of stuff in June, ready for an autumn grazing plan, and already in September for us, we would have closed up quite a lot of fields now for using for yows at topping time and stuff in November, December. So we definitely look at our grazing plan or strategy completely different now. We'd certainly have planned ahead and I suppose nearly earmarked fields for spring already, that we know if we're kind to them now, we're going to get used to that at lambing time or cattle to turnout. So yeah, it is like Michael saying, a bit of planning. It seems way in the future, but it makes a huge difference.
We've actually got some questions in from the podcast listeners, and I'm going to run straight into this one because it actually follows on from what you just said. Is it okay to rotationally graze ewes at tupping time? Or should they be set stocked and then rotated in paddocks after tupping to tidy up grass ahead of spring? Willie, for a start.
We've actually done that now for 3 years. We started in a small way the 1 year, and we just took a 24-acre field and stuck a 100 yows in it and paddocked, grazed them while tupping across it. And I'd done all my calculations, and we got a very kind November. And on the day that they should have left the field, the grass growth had been so good behind them, we could have actually gone back to the start again and re-grazed it. But we had other areas for them to go to. So we've actually ended up each tupping season now, instead of a small group of 100, we've actually changed it up, but it's less, like the sort of 300, 400 yows in a group, and still paddock them, but it's less fencing, less infrastructure, just bigger paddocks, and still 2 to 3 day shifts depending on the weather. But really get some good results out of it. The tups don't have to do a lot of mileage. All the ladies is there in a concentrated area, so it makes it very simple on them.
Michael, the business of paddock grazing, is it not just a bit of a faff, though, having to constantly move electric fencing about?
Well, I learned that very quickly, that putting up fencing and taking it down again is tiring. So I've actually got semi-permanent fencing up. So all your stock are in very small areas of your farm, so it doesn't take long to look at all your stock every day. I don't think it's a faff. That, I'm a lot lazier than most other farmers, and I get people telling me that it's too much like hard work, and these are really hard-working guys. I don't see it at all. Oh, I must add that it could become a faff if you've got little mobs of lots of stock going around, rotating and going around. Then that is a faff. And actually, hand in hand with paddock grazing comes actually a change in system where your mobs get bigger. That has implications. And Willie's been through this, haven't you, Willie?
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. The first year we did it, we just did a few groups of livestock and really saw the benefits. And the second year, we kind of micromanaged, you would say, as we always farmed, but tried to do it. But oh, gee whiz, you're shifting fences every single day, trying to get things to work in, and water pipes and water troughs and stuff. And I think if we carried on that way, we would have done, between cattle and sheep, we would have been shifting 22 mobs of livestock every other day. So we said, no, to heck with that. And we took a bit of advice for different folk that had been on that journey too. And this year we have 7 groups of livestock. And we've just upped the cool numbers to sort of 80 to 90 in a mob with our calves, and put 3 bulls in with them. And it's been very, very simple, and actually a lot easier to shift cows and calves now. They're very, very well trained. And when you're actually checking livestock now, there's just this 7 concentrated groups to go to, and that's it really. So a lot simpler really, and you have to make it easy.
You pair are obviously used to doing this, but I remember going to a demonstration day at SAC, and they were talking about paddock grazing. And the thing that really surprised me was how quickly you moved the stock on, because it's not every day, but it can be every other day.
Yeah, I would say it's
that's the fun bit, Mark.
Yeah, that's the enjoyable bit.
100 cattle of sheep munching grass is a beautiful thing, and that's what they do once they're through that gate. They just get their heads down, munch away. It brings joy to your life.
Right, next question. There's a lot of grass on farms this autumn, and ground conditions are pretty good at the moment. So what's the best way to use this grass for cattle-only farms, given that cows and calves have different requirements? Michael?
I was hoping you're going to ask Willie, Mark, because
Come on, Michael.
Well, Willie's got exactly that issue, but all I would say is they definitely have different requirements, and We had a really good guy come over for grazing groups with QMS back in 2014-15, who would advocate actually early weaning springborn calves so that they could go to the really powerful pastures, the clover-rich, new grass, plenty of it, and you can shut down your cows after weaning on the poorer bits and, not give them as much. So that's the split. And obviously, the creep feeder's not a sin, plenty of people use it to good effect. So there's no magic answer.
We've actually done that this year. We've actually weaned springborn calves early, and I'm going to do another 70 this week. We've actually just put the quiet wean paddles in their nose, leave the coos and calves together for a week. Everybody gets, I suppose the new word, socially distanced. They're happy with that. They don't need the same dependency on mother, and split them off. And the calves, the first batch of calves, they're actually on rocket fuel rotation, you would say now. And the coos are basically on cardboard and water. And that sorted the split out. And the calves are looking tremendous, really enjoying their shifts. And the coos are settled down basically on older, mature type grass. So it's something we're really been keen to try, because that's effectively cut 5 to 6 weeks housing of that calves already. They would normally be inside, but we've cut that off them. And the feed that they're on is feed that's available, but very, very cheap. So yeah, it's certainly it has its benefits, definitely. It makes the livestock follow a more natural progression, and amazing how you can build the body condition on them for the sort of autumn period, really a lot easier than what we used to do in the past. So
I'm not going to pretend this is one of the questions that listeners put in, but I am curious. How often do you actually plough up and reseed?
In Orkney, we would be working a rotation of barley quite a bit. Basically, you're sort of 3 years in barley and then back to grass then. But some of that grass in different areas could be 7 years plus, possibly even up to, there's a good few fields that's never ever been ploughed in my lifetime. But actually, since the rotational grazing, we've, I would say, sweetened and rejuvenated that greatly by managed grazing than what we were when we were set stock. So it looks a lot better already. It's definitely about the rest period for that, I would say.
It goes back to my pasture welfare cranky comment, is that, if that what Willie's describing is plants that have been treated as they wanted to be treated. So the percentage of ryegrass in a normal sward will reduce over time. By managed grazing and paddock grazing, I would argue that actually the percentage of ryegrass, if you do it in a permanent pasture field, the percentage of ryegrass actually increases. That's one of the divergent outcomes of the different grazing strategies. So,
and this is a genuine bona fide question, not one of mine. Is it a problem carrying grass over into the spring if ground conditions prevent grazing?
Well, certainly for us, I wouldn't be too keen to carry too much over till spring, just for wet conditions about January, February time. If it's a cattle-only farm, if possible, do a deal with your neighbour to take sheep in and graze it off fast, I would say. It's wasted fodder if you can use it, but if you've got sheep yourself, it's not wasted at all. You can use it on your own sheep or your own livestock, and it'll be fantastic, I would say.
This is one thing that really fascinates me, because down south, and I worship the ground that really good pasture-based dairy farmers walk on, because they make a lot of money from pasture, and it's always impressive to see. And they will go into winter with really quite high covers and get away with it. And I know that's not the case up here, because I've tried, and it does melt a wee bit. Some of the leaves just sort of die off. So the older leaves probably just sort of go mushy, if you like. But it's got to be pretty, it's got to be pretty long for that to happen. And it's got to be a reasonably hard winter for that to happen. What I would say is, if your last rotation, because I will try and shut up a section, a certain significant proportion of the farm, actually, I'll try and shut that off by the 25th of November. And if you've done a rotation and actually there's been a little bit of regrowth, that's all it needs, maybe to 5-6 centimeters. I think that's pretty perfect for Perthshire, because the regrowth has actually got quite a bit of nitrogen in it, which is kind of an antifreeze. So there is a bit of protection there. And even when I said it went mushy, it was interesting. The plants were still alive, but it's just sort of shed off its older leaves. So it looks mushy, but the actual plant is there. So it'll come away again. It does really depend on the environment. I know Willie's bothered. He's right by the sea, so he's bothered by salt and all that sort of stuff. So it's very location dependent, I would say. You've got to try and gauge it on your farm, I would suggest.
Yeah, definitely. Carrying too much grass in the winter for us would be a bad thing, a negative thing for us, really, due to the, as you're saying, Michael, the amount of salt spray, and also geese would be another thing that really, grey-leg geese would be another problem. So we would actually work quite closely with a dairy farmer and have a sort of set rotation up until sort of Christmas time on a lot of his newer reseed grass and stuff. And the benefit that he's actually found in the spring and increased grazing and silage crops would be, he's certainly very, very keen to keep that going. It's been a big boost to him, really. So it certainly is a benefit to reset that grass before winter for us.
So Chuggas in the sort of SEC equivalent, you would say, in Ireland, sort of did some work on this. And it was they had a really late frost in March, a really hard frost, and it all went to mush, But they did test it, and it was kind of like sort of medium quality silage. So it wasn't that bad. It looked awful, but it seemed to suggest, the testing seemed to suggest it was all right. But can I just say that this is an important point, is if you took the opposite of that question, so if you were paranoid about taking covers too big into winter and you grazed it all off really hard and you kept on grazing it until into January, into February, you're going to have a really late spring, and that's not the weather's fault, that's your fault. And you've just got to be careful about overgrazing during the winter, because the plants don't like that.
I'm going to paraphrase this last question, Michael, because as the winter progresses, I'm assuming that the nutritional content of the grass actually decreases. Therefore, do you have to make the paddocks bigger?
Right. First off, be careful about grazing grass that you're going to use in the spring, in January and February. That's the first one. When you test grass, it's surprising how good quality it is. The big variable is the moisture content. So you might be allocating what you think is enough, but they're actually eating mostly water. So I would say allocation is really interesting in that you do have to make allowances for the moisture content of the grass. So I would always give them a wee bit more in terms of I get really nerdy about it and work out the kilograms of dry matter they need per day and multiply that up for the mob, and then you can work out how much area they should be on for how long in terms of days. So
I would be a bit more Heath Robinson in basic, maybe, but
rule of thumb.
Well, yeah. Not every field fits the wall chart or the planner or the grazing guide, but I would say what we've found is sometimes a new fresh shift daily actually is better than a great big paddock, for the fact that sometimes if ground conditions is wetter, they're actually wasting that grass because they're doing too much mileage over it, they're tramping over it. But if it's just an intense fresh shift, they're actually utilised all that grass at an incredible rate. And sometimes you would say they should be in there for 48 hours, and it might end up 24. Depends what the weather is. And but they've used that grass as good as they can, really. So you kind of have to bend the rules a bit, but definitely each allocation they're getting every day, every other day, is fantastic what they're eating. Definitely win-win. Cuts out the feed blocks and uses everything you've got on farm, I would say.
Which is kind of the name of the game. I have to say, I found this absolutely fascinating. Michael Blanche and Willie Harcus, thank you both very much. It's been a real insight for me into something I knew very little about, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been good sort of relay what we're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's always a pleasure talking pasture, you know.
Thanks very much, Michael. Thank you very much for downloading this QMS podcast. We'd really like to get your feedback on these technical podcasts, so if you've got the time, wouldn't take terribly long, head over to QMS on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter and just give us your thoughts. I'm Mark Stephen, and until the next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. For news and to listen back to previous episodes of the podcast, visit qmscotland.co.uk. For Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork recipe videos and inspiration, visit www.scotchkitchen.com or follow Scotch Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter.